began on a cold, rainy evening inside a crowded airport cafe where soldiers and travelers sat waiting for delayed flights and steaming coffee cups filled the air with warmth and noise. Jake Turner sat near the window wearing his dark Navy SEAL jacket, his posture straight, his confidence louder than the thunder outside. He had just returned from another mission, and he carried the easy pride of a man who believed he had seen it all. His teammates laughed with him, their voices echoing across the small cafe while tired travelers glanced up and smiled politely. Jake liked the attention, he liked the respect that came with the uniform, and the stories of danger and bravery. He told between sips of hot coffee. His laughter was strong, his tone bold. He looked around the room, searching for something or someone to pass the long hours of waiting. That was when his eyes landed on a quiet woman sitting alone at a corner table. She wore a simple gray jacket, her hair tied back neatly. Her hands folded over a small notebook. She was not looking at anyone, not even her phone, just staring out the window at the falling rain. Jake smirked and nudged his teammate. Look at her, he whispered. Must be writing love poems for her cat. His friends laughed loud enough for her to hear. Jake thought he was being funny. He always joked like that during long waits, but there was something about her silence that unsettled him. She did not frown or turn away. She simply lifted her head slowly and met his eyes for a brief second, and that one calm look hit him harder than he expected. It was not anger. It was something deeper, like a quiet warning. The cafe speaker crackled. Flight 247 to San Diego delayed due to weather. Please stand by, Jake, groaned another delay. He leaned back in his chair and stretched. Then he noticed that every table around him was filling up except one, the one where the quiet woman sat alone. A staff member asked her politely if she could share the table with another passenger, and she nodded gently without looking up from her notebook. Fate or bad luck put Jake Turner right across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. He cleared his throat, trying to sound friendly. So, where are you headed? He asked. His usual confident tone carried a hint of challenge. She looked at him for a second, her eyes clear and unreadable. Nowhere special. She replied softly. He chuckled. Come on, everyone's going somewhere. She said nothing, only turned another page in her notebook. He leaned forward, trying again. What do you do for a living? Let me guess, you write romance novels. She shook her head. I used to serve, she said quietly. Jake raised an eyebrow. Serve? We're at a coffee shop, he teased. She looked up again slowly. This time her voice carried something sharp and steady. I served in the military. Her tone stopped him for a moment, but his pride pushed him forward. Oh, really? He said, smiling. You mean office work, or you were like a nurse? Maybe her lips curved slightly, not a smile, not a frown. Something in between, something that made Jake feel like he had just missed a very important clue. He looked away, pretending not to care, but inside his mind was running. She didn't look like any soldier he had ever known. No scars, no attitude, no heavy boots or medals. She looked normal too. Normal, maybe she was lying. Maybe she wanted attention. That was what he told himself as he sipped his coffee. But something about the way she held her posture, calm and certain, made him doubt his own thoughts. He wanted to ask her name, but before he could, the cafe speaker came alive again. Passengers for Flight 247 to San Diego. Please prepare for boarding gate 14. Jake stood up, grabbing his backpack. He turned toward her, with a grin. Well, soldier, maybe I'll see you on the flight. She looked up once more, her eyes still steady and quiet. Maybe, she said softly. He walked away, shaking his head, amused and curious. His teammates were already teasing him. Who was that, they asked? Jake laughed. Just some mystery lady who says she was in the military, probably just trying to sound tough. As they reached the gate, the crowd buzzed with tired chatter and the sound of rolling luggage. Jake glanced around once more, wondering where she had gone. Then the announcement came again, clear and sharp through the speakers. Passenger Raven, please report to gate 14 immediately. Passenger Raven, please report to gate 14. Jake froze mid-step. Raven. The name hit him like a sudden punch. To the chest, his breath caught in his throat. His teammates noticed the change in his face. Hey, what's wrong? Jake didn't answer. His mind spun backward years ago to a dusty battlefield, to the sound of gunfire and static, and a voice over the radio, a woman's voice call sign, Raven. That voice had guided his team out of an ambush, had saved 6 men, including him, and then she was gone. Lost in an explosion. Her aircraft never found. Raven was a legend, a ghost among soldiers. He turned slowly toward the gate, and there she was, the quiet woman walking calmly toward the line, holding a small black bag. Her gray jacket zipped up her steps, even her face peaceful. The same calm look that had silenced him now filled him with shock and disbelief. He wanted to speak to her, but his throat refused to move. His mind shouted, "It can't be her, it's impossible." But his heart already knew it was the same call sign, the same presence, the same quiet power that once led them through darkness. Jake stood frozen as she handed her ticket to the flight attendant. She looked back just once. Their eyes met across the crowd for a heartbeat. He saw the truth in her gaze. She knew he remembered. She knew who he was. And then she turned and walked down the jet bridge, leaving him standing there, speechless, surrounded by noise, but hearing only the echo of a name that had haunted him for years. Raven Jake stood still near the gate as the crowd moved around him, his chest tight, his heart beat heavy and fast. He could still hear the announcement ringing in his ears. "Passenger Raven, please report to gate 14. The name kept echoing again and again inside his head, like a voice from the past, pulling him back to a memory he had tried to bury. But never could his teammates were joking around, asking what was wrong. But he could not answer because deep down he already knew the truth. That quiet woman from the cafe was not just anyone. She was the legend they once called Raven, the ghost pilot, who vanished years ago. The airport lights flickered softly as the rain outside grew heavier. Thunder rolled across the dark sky. Jake felt a strange chill, not from the cold but from recognition. He remembered the mission, the chaos, the radio call, in the desert where everything went wrong when their team was surrounded, and a single pilot with the call sign Raven had guided them out. Her calm voice cutting through panic, like a light in darkness. She had stayed behind to cover their escape, and when her jet went down, they never found her body. Everyone thought she was gone forever. Now she was here alive, sitting quietly in an airport like an ordinary traveler. While he had just mocked her without knowing, Jake's throat felt dry. He wanted to run after her to say something, to apologize, but fear and guilt held him in place as the boarding line grew shorter. He finally moved, pushing through the crowd until he reached the gate. But by the time he got there, she was already gone. Inside the tunnel, her gray jacket disappearing into the light, on the plane Jake found his seat near the back. But he could not sit still. His mind was racing, trying to piece it all together. He looked down the rows, searching for her, and then he saw her sitting by the window near the middle of the plane, calm, quiet, watching the rain slide down the glass. The seat beside her was empty. He hesitated for a long moment before walking down the aisle slowly, as if each step might break something fragile. When he reached her row, she looked up without surprise, as if she already knew he would come. "May I sit here?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. She nodded without speaking. He sat down, feeling awkward. His usual confidence gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, respect, maybe even fear. The plane engines hummed softly, and the cabin lights dimmed as passengers settled in. Jake looked at her profile, her calm eyes, her steady hands, and finally said softly, "I know who you are." Her head turned slightly, and for the first time he saw a flicker of emotion in her face. "Do you now?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with something sharp. He swallowed hard. "Years ago. Afghanistan operation, Dust Line. We were trapped. Your voice came through, you guided us out, you saved my team, and then you went down. We all thought you were gone." She listened quietly, her eyes unreadable when he finished. She looked out the window again. The rain streaks caught the light like silver lines across glass. After a long silence, she said, "I was gone for a while." Jake blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She sighed and said, "Sometimes coming back is harder than staying lost." Her words hung heavy between them. Jake didn't know how to respond. He felt small for the first time in years. All the medals, all the pride felt meaningless in front of the woman he had laughed at only hours ago. He tried to speak again, but she turned to him and asked, Do you still remember the last thing I said over the radio? Jake nodded. Yes, you said I'll see you in the sky. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried both warmth and sorrow. I never left the sky, she whispered. The plane began to move down the runway, the engines roaring louder, the cabin vibrating softly. Jake could not take his eyes off her. He wanted to know everything, where she had been, how she had survived, why she had never come back. But something told him not to push her. Not yet. She carried a calm that came from deep pain, a kind of peace that only those who have lost too much can hold. As the plane lifted through the dark clouds, he realized that sitting next to her felt like being part of something far greater than himself. When the plane reached steady air, she leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered softly, almost to herself, "People see what they want to see. A loud soldier is respected. A quiet one is forgotten." Jake stayed silent, thinking about his own arrogance, about the way he had judged her before knowing anything about her. He wanted to tell her he was sorry, but before he could, a voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been asked to delay landing due to storm conditions. Please remain seated." The lights dimmed again, and for a brief moment everything went quiet, just the soft hum of engines and rain tapping against the windows. Jake looked at her again. She opened her eyes and said quietly, "You should not carry guilt for things you didn't know." He frowned. "How did you know what I was thinking?" She gave a small half-smile. "I can always tell what soldiers think, even when they stay quiet." The storm outside grew worse. Flashes of lightning lit up the sky and passengers murmured, nervously, but she remained calm. Her eyes focused, steady, unshaken, and Jake realized why they had called her Raven, not just for her skill in the air, but for her grace in the storm. She was not afraid of darkness. She moved through it, as the turbulence shook the plane slightly. Jake gripped the armrest, she noticed, and said in a soft, teasing tone, "Nervous soldier." He managed a weak grin. Not used to someone else flying. She smiled again, then turned her gaze back to the storm and said, "Don't worry, I've flown through worse." And in that moment, Jake knew deep inside this was only the beginning. Something larger was coming. Something that would bring both their pasts crashing into the present, and he could not escape it now because the sky had just spoken her name again. Raven. The storm outside had finally calmed, but inside the cabin, Jake's thoughts were still spinning like wild wind. He kept looking at the woman beside him, the one they once called Raven. She sat still, her eyes closed, as if she was listening to something far away. Maybe her memories, maybe the sound of her own heart. Jake wanted to speak, but his words stayed locked behind guilt and awe. He could not understand how a woman like her could sit so quietly after everything she had been through. When the plane landed, passengers began to gather their bags and rush toward the exit. Jake stayed seated, watching her every move. She waited calmly, as if she was in no hurry, as if time itself obeyed her when she finally stood up. Jake followed a few steps behind, afraid to lose her again. She walked with soft steps through the crowded terminal, her small black bag hanging over her shoulder. The bright lights of the airport made her look even more distant, like she belonged to another world. Jake caught up near the exit. "Hey, wait," he said. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his, calm and unreadable. "Yes, Commander Turner," she said, using his title from years ago. He froze, hearing it from her lips. "How did you know my name?" She smiled faintly. "I remember voices, I never forget those I saved." Her words felt like a gentle punch to the chest, leaving him breathless. He took a deep breath. "I owe you my life and my team's too. You were the one who got us out of that ambush." She tilted her head slightly, as if studying his face. "You do not owe me anything, Commander. You survived because you followed orders." Jake shook his head. "No. We survived because you stayed behind, because you sacrificed everything." She looked away, her jaw tightening for a moment. There was a flicker of pain in her eyes, but she quickly hid it behind calm silence. They stood near the large glass wall where planes took off one after another. The sky beyond was still gray from the rain. Jake tried to break the silence. "Where have you been all these years? Everyone thought you were dead." She took a slow breath before answering. Sometimes it is easier to let the world think you are gone. Jake frowned, but why? She turned to face him, her voice low. Because the world forgets broken soldiers faster than fallen heroes. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Jake didn't know how to respond. He saw the scars on her hands, small thin lines that told a story of fire and steel. She noticed him, looking, and hid them in her jacket. "You want the truth?" she asked. He nodded. She said, "I crashed into the mountains. My wing was gone. I should have died. But I didn't. Locals found me, carried me through snow and silence. It took months before I could even walk again. By the time I returned, the reports had already written my ending." Jake listened in stunned silence. The thought of her surviving that wreck seemed impossible, but the proof stood right in front of him. He asked softly, "And after that?" She said, "I tried to go back, but they said I was unfit. I could not fly anymore. They called me a ghost, so I became one." She looked away again, her voice softer. "I stayed hidden, worked quiet jobs, nothing that mattered until today." Jake wanted to ask, why today, but before he could, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded paper with faded ink. She handed it to him. "I was waiting for someone to give this to," she said. Jake unfolded it and froze. It was a letter with the seal of the Navy top clearance, his name written across it. He looked at her confused. "What is this?" she said. "Your next mission, though. You do not know it yet." He stared at her. "You mean this is from command?" She nodded, not from them directly, but from someone who still believes in what we once were. Jake felt his pulse quicken as he read the first few lines. His eyes widened. This can't be right. This mission was canceled years ago. She looked straight at him. Not canceled. Just forgotten. He looked back at the paper, then at her. "This is dangerous, classified beyond anything I've seen. Why give it to me?" she said. "Because I can't go, but you can. And you will." Jake shook his head. "I don't even know who to trust anymore." She smiled faintly. "That is why. I chose you, because even with your pride, you still have a clean heart." Her words cut deep, but also gave him something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his jacket, then asked quietly, "What about you?" She looked toward the runway. "I've done my part, now it is yours," he wanted to argue. But she turned and began to walk away through the crowd, disappearing like smoke. Jake ran after her, pushing through people calling her name. Sarah. Wait, that was the first time he had said her real name. She stopped but didn't turn. He reached her side, breathless. "Why me?" She finally faced him, her expression calm. "Because you still listen to voices even when you don't believe in them." Before he could reply, a soldier in uniform approached from the other side of the hall holding a sealed envelope. He saluted sharply. "Captain Hale, ma'am, orders for you." She took it quietly and nodded. The soldier left. Jake stared at her. "You said you were out," she said, softly. "Not everything ends when they write your name off." She looked at the envelope, then at him, her eyes unreadable again. "You wanted truth, Commander. Here it is. Some ghosts are called back before they are ready." He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but she was already walking away again, leaving him holding the letter in one hand and the memory of her calm voice in the other. Jake stood there, feeling the weight of the paper against his palm, heavy like destiny, heavy like a second chance. He looked toward the window where rain still fell in silver lines across the glass and whispered to himself, "Raven, what are you pulling me into this time?" The airport was almost empty now, the lights dim, the rain still falling outside in long silver lines. Jake stood near the glass wall holding the folded letter in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly. He had read it again and again, but the words still didn't make sense. It was a mission order written in the old format, sealed under an outdated code name, Operation Echo Dawn, the same operation that was shut down years ago after a failed extraction. It mentioned coordinates, a time, and a single line that read, "Deliver the package or everything is lost." He looked around, searching for Sarah, but she was gone again, like she had vanished into air. Only the echo of her calm voice stayed behind inside his head. He wanted to believe this was some kind of mistake, maybe a prank, maybe his tired mind imagining things, but the weight of the paper felt too real. Too cold, too heavy. He walked toward the exit, trying to catch up with her, but before he could reach the door, a shadow appeared from the corner. It was the same soldier who had given her the envelope. The young man's face was tense, his eyes darting around like he was being followed. "Commander Turner," he whispered quickly before Jake could reply. The soldier pressed a small device into his hand. "Take this," she said. "You'd know what to do." Jake opened his mouth to ask, "What's going on?" But the soldier was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd. Jake looked down at the device. It was a small black key drive. Nothing written on it, just a faint symbol that looked like the wings of a bird. He realized it matched the emblem that used to be painted on Raven's jet years ago. He felt a strange shiver crawl up his spine. Something told him that Sarah was involved in something far bigger than a forgotten mission. He left the airport and stepped into the rainy night, the cold wind biting against his face. He took a cab to his small apartment near the docks. The ride was quiet except for the sound of rain on the roof. His mind raced with memories of war, of betrayal, of the voice of Raven guiding him through chaos. He thought about the words she said. Some ghosts are called back before they are ready. When he reached home, he sat on his desk, placed the letter in front of him, and connected the key drive to his laptop. The screen flickered for a moment, then lines of coded text appeared, followed by a video message. It was her face, Sarah's voice calm but serious. "If you are watching this, Jake, it means the storm has already started. I can't explain everything here, but Operation Echo Dawn was never canceled. It was buried. What we found years ago wasn't meant to stay hidden. They are trying to wake it up again." Her eyes looked straight into the camera, her tone low and steady. "There is a data core under those coordinates, something that holds records of every covert operation, every secret name, every file they ever tried to erase. If it falls into the wrong hands, they will rewrite history itself. I can't go back there. My clearance was revoked, but you can trust no one. Not even your old command. This file will erase in 60 seconds. Jake leaned closer, his heartbeat fast. Sarah continued, "The only person who can guide you is the one with the same call sign as before. You'll know what it means." She hesitated for a second, then added, "Jake, this time you lead." I followed. The screen went black. He sat frozen, the rain still tapping at the window outside. Everything felt unreal. The woman he mocked in a cafe was now sending him into a mission that could change everything he thought he knew about his own career. He rubbed his face, trying to think clearly. Then a sudden knock came at his door, sharp and fast. He grabbed his sidearm and moved carefully toward the entrance, his instincts kicking in. He opened the door halfway and saw a man in a dark coat holding a badge. "Navy Intelligence," the man said quietly. "Commander Turner, we need to talk." Jake's muscles tensed. "What's this about?" The agent's eyes were cold. "You were seen with Captain Hale today. We need to know what she gave you." Jake hesitated, his grip tightening on the doorframe. "She didn't give me anything." The agent smirked. "Maybe not yet, but she will." Then handed him a card and whispered, "If she contacts you again, call us immediately." Jake closed the door slowly, his mind torn between suspicion and trust. He walked back to his desk, but the letter and the key drive were gone. The drawer empty, the laptop screen blank. He froze again, his heart pounding. Someone had been inside while he answered the door. He looked toward the window. It was open slightly. The rain dripping onto the floor, a single black feather lay on the sill. He picked it up, his hands shaking. It was artificial carbon fiber, military-grade Raven's mark. She had been there watching, protecting, or warning, he wasn't sure. But he knew one thing: he couldn't ignore this any longer. He packed his gear, old maps, encrypted radio, and the letter he printed before it vanished. Then he took one last look at the feather and whispered softly, "What are you planning, Sarah?" He left the apartment before dawn. The streets still wet with rain and mist. The city asleep as he walked toward the harbor where the old naval transport waited. His mind clear now, his heart steady. He didn't know if this was a mission or a trap, but he knew he had to find the truth about Operation Echo Dawn, and about the woman who carried the name Raven as. The first light of morning touched the horizon. Jake stepped onto the boat, his reflection flickering in the dark water below. He whispered into the wind, You saved me once, Raven, maybe it's my turn now. The sea was dark and endless under the pale morning sky. The boat moved slowly across the waves, carrying Jake toward a place that only existed in coordinates and memory. The wind was sharp against his face, and his mind kept replaying Sarah's message over and over, her calm voice saying, "Trust no one. Not even your command." The more he thought about it, the more the world he knew began to feel like a lie. Every order, every mission, every medal suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle that never truly fit together. He reached the shore by noon, an old dock hidden behind cliffs covered in mist. The air smelled of salt and rust as he stepped off the boat. The place looked abandoned. No guards, no cameras, no signs of life, just silence broken by the cry of distant gulls. He followed the path uphill, guided by the coordinates printed on the letter. After half an hour of walking, he reached a metal door, half buried under the rocks, painted with faded words, "Restricted Area." Jake pushed it open and stepped inside, the echo of his boots filling the narrow tunnel. The tunnel led to a wide chamber with broken lights flickering on the ceiling. Old crates, scattered around, and a single terminal glowing faintly on a steel table. He walked closer and touched the screen. It came alive, showing the same symbol he had seen on the key drive, the black wings of a raven. A voice came through the speaker, low and familiar. "Welcome back, Commander. I see you found it." Jake froze. "Sarah," he whispered, "how are you here?" Her voice replied, calm and steady. "I told you I never really left." He looked around, trying to find a camera or speaker, but saw nothing, only the sound of her voice floating through the air. "This base," she said, "was one of ours, built for data recovery after the war, but someone tried to erase it. Someone who didn't want the truth to live." Jake frowned. "What truth?" Sarah said. "The truth about the missions, the ones they called classified, the ones where soldiers were sent to die for something that never existed." Her words cut deep and cold. He wanted to ask more, but the screen suddenly flashed. Red warning signals filled the room. "Unauthorized access detected." Sarah's voice turned sharp. "Jake, you need to leave now." He grabbed the letter and ran toward the exit, but the door behind him slammed shut, locking automatically. Smoke hissed from the vents, and a metallic voice began counting down. "System purge in 60 seconds. Jake coughed, the air turning thick. He looked around, desperate for another way out. Then he saw a ladder leading upward through a narrow shaft. He climbed fast, each step slippery with oil, his lungs burning as alarms screamed below. When he reached the top, he burst through a hatch onto the surface, gasping for air. The wind hit his face, cold and strong, behind him. The underground base exploded in a burst of fire and smoke, rocks falling like rain. He rolled to the ground, covering his head as debris flew everywhere. The noise was deafening when it finally stopped. He lifted his head and saw the smoke rising into the sky like a dark storm cloud. Before he could move, a helicopter appeared from behind the cliffs, its blades slicing the air. A voice shouted through a loudspeaker, "Commander Turner, stand down." Jake's instincts kicked in. He ran for cover behind a rock. The chopper hovered low. Men in black uniforms jumped out, guns raised. One shouted, "We are here. To secure the site, drop your weapon." Jake yelled back, "Who sent you?" No answer came, only gunfire spraying across the rocks. He ducked and returned fire, his training taking over his heart, pounding with anger, confusion and fear. Then a sharp whistle cut through the noise, and suddenly the gunfire stopped. Jake peeked out from behind the rock and saw her standing near the smoke. Sarah Hale, wearing a dark flight jacket. Her hair tied back, her eyes steady as ever. She held a small remote in one hand and shouted, "Enough, these men don't know what they are doing." She walked toward him, calm and fearless. The soldiers lowered their weapons, unsure what to do. She looked at Jake and said softly, "You should have stayed away." He stood up, his jaw tight. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" She nodded slightly. "I told you the storm was coming." He pointed toward the wreck behind her. "You almost got me killed." She stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. "And I saved you again, Commander. You're welcome." The soldiers looked confused. One of them spoke, "Ma'am, we have orders from command to detain both of you." She smiled thinly. "Tell your command they can try." She pressed a button on the remote, and suddenly the ground shook as a second explosion went off behind the cliff, sending the soldiers scrambling for cover. Jake grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the ridge. "Are you insane?" he shouted. She smiled without fear. "Just practical." She said they would have taken you alive and buried the truth forever. They ran together toward the trees, bullets flying past them until the forest swallowed them both, the sound of helicopters fading behind the wind. When they finally stopped, Jake turned to her, breathing hard. You planned this? She nodded. Yes and no, I prepared for it in case they came sooner than expected. He shook his head. I don't understand, who are you fighting against? She looked at him, her eyes dark and steady. Not who, Jake. What? The forest was quiet around them. Birds gone. The air heavy. She sat on a fallen log and took a small device from her pocket, pressing a code into it. A map appeared in the air, glowing blue. The mark showed a mountain range far north. She said, this is where the real data core is hidden. What exploded? Back there was only a decoy. He stared at the map, then at her. What's at the real site? She looked up at him, her voice low and certain, the truth about why Raven never died. The forest was cold and silent, the night wind moving through the tall trees. Like whispers, Jake sat by a small fire staring at the glowing map that floated above Sarah's hand. The light from the device painted her face in soft shades of blue, her eyes calm, yet filled with something heavy, something he could not name. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but for the first time in his life he knew when to stay quiet. She looked at him and said softly, tomorrow we reach the mountain. Once we find the data core, you will understand everything. He nodded, his heart heavy, his mind running wild with thoughts about the mission, about the lies, about the woman beside him, who had already saved him twice. She looked tired, but not weak. Her body carried the memory of battles, her spirit, the weight of secrets. He watched her feed another piece of wood into the fire, and the light flickered across her scarred hands. Those hands had once controlled a jet that saved his team. Those same hands now held the truth that could change everything. When morning came, they moved through the forest quietly, following the map through narrow paths and steep hills. The mountain rose in the distance, covered in fog, its peak lost behind the clouds as they climbed higher. The air grew colder and thinner, the silence broken only by the sound of their boots and the crunch of snow underfoot. After hours of climbing, they reached a flat ridge where an old bunker stood hidden behind thick vines and rock. Its metal door, rusted but still strong, Sarah placed her hand on the panel and whispered an old code from memory. The door opened slowly with a low hiss, revealing darkness inside. Jake followed her down the stairs, his flashlight cutting through the dust and shadows. The air was dry, filled with the smell of metal and old circuits. The deeper they went, the stronger the humming sound grew until they reached a wide chamber at the end of the tunnel. Inside stood a massive black cube covered in cables and blinking lights. Sarah walked toward it. Slowly, like someone returning home after years of exile, she touched the surface and the machine came alive. Blue lines of light running across its frame. This is it, she said quietly. The core. Every mission, every soldier, every classified secret is stored here. Jake looked around, his eyes wide. This could expose everything, every lie, every hidden death. Sarah nodded, but her voice was sad. Some truths are too heavy to free, too dangerous to carry. Jake frowned. Then, why bring me here? She looked up at him. Because I needed someone who still believes in doing the right thing even when it hurts. He stared at her, confused. I don't understand. She sighed. You will soon. She pressed a sequence on the console and a screen lit up showing files, images, names, reports, all marked top secret. Jake leaned closer, reading them, his stomach turning. He saw missions he had led where outcomes were changed, official records rewritten, heroes turned into traitors, traitors turned into martyrs, and at the center of it all, one name: Raven. The file showed her crash report, dated and signed by officers who had never even searched for her. She had been erased on purpose. He looked at her, shock and anger mixing inside. Why would they do this? She answered quietly, because I saw something I shouldn't have. Operation Echo Dawn wasn't just about data. It was about testing a new control system, a way to manipulate commands through remote channels. I refused to help, so they silenced me. Jake shook his head, his fists tight. You were right to stop them. She smiled sadly. Maybe, but truth doesn't win wars, Commander. It only changes who you fight. Before he could reply, the lights flickered. An alarm rang, echoing through the chamber. "They found us," she said quickly, downloading as much data as she could. Jake pulled his weapon, ready to defend the tunnel. Footsteps echoed above, men shouting orders. They were surrounded. The door shook under impact. Sarah looked at him, eyes steady. "I'll hold them. You finish the transfer?" He shook his head. "No. We do this together." She smiled faintly. "You always were stubborn." The door burst open. Gunfire filled the air. Jake returned fire, covering her as she worked. Sparks flew from the console. She grabbed a small drive and threw it to him. "Take it, go," he shouted. "I'm not leaving you," she said. "You have to, or all of this dies with us." The machine hummed louder, its lights flashing red. Jake saw what she was doing, overloading the core. He grabbed her arm, but she pushed him back. The door behind him blew open from another explosion, and he was thrown outside by the force. When he woke, the sky was on fire, smoke rising from the mountain like a burning storm. The ground shook with aftershocks. He tried to stand, but his body felt weak. He saw the bunker collapsing into itself, flames bursting through the cracks. "Sarah," he shouted, his voice breaking, but there was no answer. Only the wind carrying ash and silence. He stumbled forward, but the path was gone, swallowed by fire and stone. He dropped to his knees, holding the small drive in his hand, the only thing left of her. Hours later, rescue teams arrived. Helicopters circled above, and soldiers in dark uniforms searched the area. One officer approached him. "Commander Turner, you're lucky to be alive." He didn't answer. He only stared at the horizon. The officer noticed the drive and reached for it, but Jake closed his hand tight, saying, "This one stays with me." The officer hesitated, then nodded, and walked away. Days turned into weeks. The official report said the explosion was an accident, the base destroyed by unstable power cells. No mention of Sarah Hale, no mention of Raven, but Jake knew the truth. He watched from the shore one evening as the sun sank into the ocean, its light fading like a promise. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black feather carbon fiber, the last trace of her. Then his radio crackled, a soft, familiar voice breaking through static. "Eagle Team. This is Raven, 01, coordinates inbound." He froze, his heart pounding. That voice was impossible, but it was real, steady, calm, alive. He looked to the sky, tears in his eyes, and whispered back, "Copy that, Raven, always ready."